We all should be striving to do better and to be better. And the human race depends on it in so many different ways. So if you are somebody who's getting stuck on traditions and old societal constructs and the way things used to be, I challenge you to allow yourself to be open to new ideas, because oftentimes they allow us to graduate to the next phase of being a human being and end up being better for generations to come. What up? It's Dramos, and this is the recap, of course, as I do each and every week, breaking down some of the biggest headlines from this last week. Now, again, I am flying solo on this show because, man, there's so much I just want to dive into and kind of just speak my piece on. So I want to kind of just get in here and let y'all know how I really feel on a few of these topics that have been going on throughout the course of this last week or so. So, man, without further ado, let's dive into some of the BS from this last week. Now, the chips, they're starting to fall in the world of the human cheese doodle that is Donald J. Trump, as one of his cronies got paid a little visit from the FBI, right? So this last week, Mike Lindell, better known as the MyPillow guy and one of Donald Trump's ultimate little fanboys, Mike had his phone seized by the FBI. And while there's absolutely nothing funny about our democracy as we know it being at risk because of these morons who are obsessed with Donald Trump, but I have to give these Trumplicans credit because they always seem to find a way to give us a good laugh, right? And this is a perfect example of that, right? So this past Tuesday, our buddy Mike, much to this dismay, I'm sure, of his primary care physician, was sitting in his car, right? Picture this. He's sitting in his car, he's licking his lips, he's getting excited, he's chomping at the bit as he is next in line to order at the drive-thru at his local Hardee's fast food restaurant, right? Yet sadly, before he could get his hands on their famous Monster Angus burger and its 1,000 calories, he was abruptly interrupted by the FBI, who quickly notified him that they had a warrant to seize his phone in connection to a criminal investigation that is currently happening around possible election tampering. Shame, shame, shame. Now, of course, Mike, he took to the media to defend his good name and held up an alleged copy of the warrant that included the following, quote, authorities were seeking evidence of possible violations by Lindell, Peters, and several others of federal laws against identity theft and intentional damage to a protected computer. Now, that is what the alleged warrant of Mike Lindell read on his little media blitz that he did, right? And what I love is Mike actually talked about this on his podcast, because of course we need a podcast from the MyPillow guy, right? And his response to this warrant was, quote, I don't even own a computer. Wow. So this is incredibly shocking because if you remember, Mike Lindell, again, aka the MyPillow guy, has been parading around the country claiming that he is the genius, right, who has figured out how the 2020 elections were rigged, right? And of course, always down for a good fairy tale, Trumplicans everywhere blindly believed these claims and propped him up as this, supposed incredible patriot, right? And yes, that's right. The guy who he himself admitted to not owning a computer is somehow the mastermind who allegedly cracked an intricate voter hacking system. The man literally cannot hop on a Zoom call right now if he needed to, let alone crack the case of an alleged act of cyber terrorism that allegedly stole the 2020 election, right? Like, what are we even talking about anymore? Like, come on, Trumplicans. Even I have to admit it. You deserve better. Now, moving away from the fast food enthusiasts of the far right, let's talk about, yet another sad reminder of the current state of our country because of the inaction of the powers that be when it comes to actually really doing something when we talk about the idea of gun control in this country, right? So at this point, we're all incredibly familiar with the tragedy that happened in Uvalde, Texas, just a few months ago, where 19 children and 2 teachers were senselessly murdered at Robb Elementary School, right? We're all far too familiar with that story and others just like it, unfortunately, right? And with the horrors of that day, still, I'm sure, at the front of everyone's mind in that town, right? Kids are now going back to school this last week to start a new school year. And sadly, their fears were validated as a shootout happened in broad daylight at the Uvalde Memorial Park, leaving 2 children wounded and others even further traumatized, right? Now, police believe that the shootout was gang related, but it's still a scary reminder of the lack of real change in regards to gun reform in this country, right? I mean, listen, how many more shootings do we have to hear about on the news, mass shooting or just acts of violence in general that seem to be a regular occurrence in this country? How many more of these stories, how many more lives have to be lost until we begin to take this seriously? And listen, I understand the argument that bad people are going to do bad things, right? Bad people will still find a way to do bad things. But why make it easier for them, right? Why give them, such an easy path towards just destroying our civilization and our country as we know it, And it's almost, I hate to say it's like the powers that be, the universe, God, whatever you believe in is giving us yet another reminder, like, you guys didn't pay attention the last time. Let me, in a sort of tragically ironic way, remind you that this is still an issue that you guys need to get your stuff together on. And I almost slipped up and cursed there because this is something that is so incredibly infuriating. And I don't care what side of the aisle you fall on. This should be a priority. To me, it's common sense, right? We as citizens, we have proven that we as a whole cannot handle the responsibility of having these killing machines at our beck and call, right? And listen, I understand the majority of gun owners are responsible, right? They don't commit acts of violence. But the reality is there are still far too many people using these weapons for horror, right? To hurt others, to take the lives of other people senselessly, to leave, children without their parents, or even worse, parents without their children, right? And I think if you actually cared about the greater good, of this country, and the way that so many people, claim to, right? The flying of the flags, you're so patriotic, you love this country, right? You eat, breathe, and sleep America, right? Then why would you want its citizens to be in danger for no reason whatsoever, just so you can get your rocks off shooting some guns out there in a gun range? And again, there are levels to this. I'm not going to claim that I have all of the answers here, but at the end of the day, the fact that this is not a bigger conversation, the fact that we are not running towards making a substantial change when it comes to gun reform in this country, that is incredibly scary to me, and it's incredibly telling of where the priorities of the powers that be lie. And sadly, as we have seen, people on the right, all they care about is keeping their constituents happy, who love this whole Second Amendment, right? And also who are in the pockets of the NRA, who are donating much of that money towards them, right? And that's who they care about appealing to. They don't care about the everyday person who is fearful of going to the grocery store, right? Or dropping their kid off for school. No, they don't give a damn about us, about the everyday person. And listen, I mean, I hate to piggyback off of tragedy, right? But I mean, you see the story of rapper PNB Rock, who was sadly gunned down in Los Angeles this last week, right? To be robbed of his jewelry, right? For no real good reason. That man is no longer with us, and his family is mourning the loss of a loved one, right? And again, bad people are going to do bad things, but why make it easier on them? Why not hold these people further accountable? Why not make it far more difficult for someone to obtain a weapon, right? It just doesn't make any sense to me. There's a lot of senseless violence happening out there in this world. And the reality is, when you talk about, you know, a lot of the violence, because what we're seeing, right? Because there's going to be all types of talk like, oh, well, gang violence, or, you know, minority crime, right? All this nonsense. It's incredible to me, the energy and the resources that we will put towards making sure that your Second Amendment right is protected, rather than actually correcting some of the issues that we're talking about here, right? Of course, in unfortunately, you know, impoverished areas, the idea of violence is a very prevalent thing, right? And making guns harder to get will not completely solve that, right? So I'm talking about a kind of a two-headed discussion almost when I discuss this. But my point being, we're caring about all of the wrong things. We literally are fighting to keep the right to own guns just because, right? Just because we're American and guns are as American as apple pie, right? That's what we're fighting for. And we're literally having companies and politicians happily accepting money in their pockets to throw towards the idea of promoting the safety of guns and the right to have a gun, right? And again, I bring up the idea of impoverished communities because these are all resources and energy that could be pushed in a direction of actually helping people out who are less fortunate. Thus, you know, creating a world where the idea of doing something illegal, having to resort to the idea of robbing or committing an illegal activity may not have to be such a prevalent resource for people who feel like, you know, they have no other way, right? Maybe giving them an option and devoting some of these millions of dollars that go into promoting guns and how guns are so great. If we reallocated, you know, some of that energy and some of those funds, we could actually genuinely begin to solve this problem, right? And again, that's an answer to anyone who says bad people are going to do bad things. You want to take away crime, it's a two-headed monster. Again, you make the weapons less easy to come by, but also invest the resources in helping out some of these communities that are sadly more afflicted with cases like this than others. But what do I know, right? You know, I mean, I'm just sitting here. I'm a talking head. I'm a lib, right? I'm just this liberal, progressive this, progressive that. I want to be blindly seeing things, right? But the reality is, you guys are literally fighting for absolutely nothing. People on the right, people fighting so hard for guns. You're literally fighting for absolutely nothing. And those of us who are speaking out about the idea of gun reform and what needs to happen in this country, I'm speaking and advocating on the lives of actual Americans and human beings here in this country, and not wanting to see more children get sensibly gunned down, not wanting to see more parents get gunned down while shopping for a birthday cake for their loved one while in a supermarket, right? That's what I'm fighting for. So at the end of the day, it's not Democrat or Republican. It's ask yourself, what are you actually fighting for at the end of the day? What are you advocating for? All of you people who are going so hard, you know, advocating for being able to own your weaponry, like, think about what you're actually advocating for. Think about that you are literally choosing a gun over the potential lives of other Americans in this country. And that doesn't sound very American to me, or actually, I guess on the contrary, sadly, it is very much so the current status quo in this country. And I hope that, you know, as we begin to reflect on some of these tragedies that we've seen, some of you begin to come around on this topic, because it's very obvious that there is a problem in this country. And we've seen other countries, Japan or New Zealand, limit and truthfully almost eradicate gun violence in their countries because of the imposing laws that are far stricter on owning a gun. We've seen it work for other countries. We are all just sort of propagandized here into the American way of the Second Amendment, and that's all just big NRA money in the pockets of politicians and propaganda meant to make somebody else rich at your expense. Just some food for thought when it comes to some of these ideas and talking about gun reform and gun violence in this country. Now, lastly, on a lighter note, I want to talk a bit about a viral story that's been going around, because I think it speaks to something that I often talk about in this show in regards to letting go of old ideas and traditions that no longer serve us, you know, or the progression of our communities, right? And I think that this is an example of that. I was talking about this a lot on last week's show, you know, kind of forgetting old notions and old ideas and things that were passed down from the previous generation that no longer serve us, right? So you have this video that's been going around the internet. It's a video of a woman in the Dominican Republic who proposed to her boyfriend, right? And he said yes, happily, so we have a happy ending here. but she publicly proposed to her boyfriend. Now, of course, the internet is going to internet, and people have their opinions, right? Some are applauding her for being so progressive, right? And then of course on the other side of things, you have others shaming her for breaking quote unquote tradition, right? And let's talk about this idea of tradition, and it goes beyond this idea of this video, right? I think it's a bigger conversation. I'm using it kind of as an entryway to what we're talking about, and just as a very simple example of kind of some of the things that I'm seeing or wanting to speak on when it comes to our community, and I think society in general, right? Let's talk about the idea of tradition for a second. Tradition, at the end of the day, it is all man-made, right? It is not real. It is a societal construct, a communal construct that we follow, and it's an asinine rule that really doesn't have any actual merit aside from the sort of laws that people put in place societally, right? So this idea of the male has to be the one to propose because we're talking about gender roles here, right? But gender roles, again, are societal constructs. These aren't real things, right? The idea that a woman can't propose to a man because it's just not the way things done. Again, these are like prehistoric and toxic notions that only begin to hold us back from progressing as human beings. And more specifically for this conversation, our community, right? I was talking about it last week with the idea of Bad Bunny and kissing his male backup dancer, and how there was this whole controversy in our community, and people saying it was an L for Puerto Ricans and this, that, and the third, right? These old notions that, again, do not serve us whatsoever. Like, we have to recognize that things are meant to change. Ideas are meant to happen that invoke progression and change, right? At one point in time, women weren't allowed to vote, right? Women weren't allowed to work. And now the world has completely changed for the better because of those things being thrown out the window, right? And those were at one point societal constructs. Those were at one point tradition, right? And again, those are things that are meant to be outgrown. We're meant to learn and become better. And when we fight against it, we're literally fighting against our own education and becoming far more evolved as human beings, right? And I'm not trying to blow this whole situation out of proportion. I understand this is a simple viral internet video, right? And it's something that just sparks innocent conversation, and it's not that deep, right? This particular video, but I believe that the backlash that this woman is getting is, again, a perfect example of the constraints that we put on ourselves based upon these asinine societal constructs. Once again, these are all man-made, right? Think about the idea of wearing a suit, right? That makes you, educated and more, more hireable to a job. But again, that is a societal construct, right? That doesn't mean that somebody is actually a good employee because they could throw on a tailored suit. It doesn't mean that they're actually intelligent, right? But that is all created and it's all man-made. Again, think about words, right? Curse words. We give them the meaning. They don't actually have real meaning aside from the one that we give them, right? And I think it's important that we all realize things are meant to change. Rules are meant to be broken. Things are meant to evolve. And that's how we get better as people. When we learn, we end up doing better. Again, you think about the stuff that was legal, within our parents' lifetime, and that has changed drastically. The ideas that were incredibly toxic that have changed drastically and progressed in today's day and age that are necessary. We cannot fight against progression. And I think trying to stick to the way things have always been done, be it politics, be it societal constructs, that is only a surefire way to halt our progression as human beings and stunt our very own growth and stunt our very own potential, which is terrible for all of us as human beings in this world, right? We all should be striving to do better and to be better. And the human race depends on it in so many different ways. So if you are somebody who's getting stuck on traditions and old societal constructs and the way things used to be, I challenge you to allow yourself to be open to new ideas, because oftentimes they allow us to graduate to the next phase of being a human being and end up being better for generations to come. Now, with that said, I know I threw a lot at you in today's show. We covered some politics. We covered, tragedy in Uvalde once again. We talked about some societal constructs. I feel like using this show to get a lot of things off my chest, a lot of conversations I've been seeing on the internet, and debates that have been happening. So I'm grateful to have this platform to share those conversations with you and have these types of talks. Now, of course, as we always do, I want to end the show on some positivity in the form of a positive quote. Now, today's quote comes to us from Albert Camus, and I might be pronouncing dude's name wrong, his last name. I apologize. I don't even think he's living anymore, but, if I've offended, I apologize. But the quote is incredible, and I think it's so pertinent to a lot of the things that we've been talking about recently on the show. And Albert says, quote, "Every act of rebellion expresses a nostalgia for innocence and an appeal to the essence of being." And I love this so much. Obviously, the word rebellion is inside of that quote, and that's often what I'm talking about: breaking tradition, fighting against societal constructs, new ideas, innovation, progression as a human being, right? Rebelling against the system overall is I think what I'm kind of harping on here. But I also love that he talks about the idea of nostalgia and innocence, right? And those being the essence of being, because I think so many of us fail to sort of realize that we had a lot more figured out than we thought we did as kids, right? I think as kids, we knew what it was to truly enjoy life, right? To truly enjoy each day. When you talk about the idea of innocence and why we have this nostalgia for the way things used to be, it's because as kids, before we got tainted by the outside world, we simply were just doing the things that made us happy, right? We took every opportunity that we could, every free moment that we could, to do the things that brought us joy, right? To spend time with the people that made us happy, to do the activities, that really, revved us up, the things that really brought joy to us, right? We spent the time for those things. We didn't write things off as silly, or we didn't think anything was impossible, right? We had our dreams ahead of us, right? We had all that the world was to offer us. It seemed like it was right there at our fingertips. Nothing seemed impossible. And then as you get older, and as society and the constraints of society begin to get their hold on you, you begin to lose a bit of that freedom that you had as a child, right? That feeling that anything is possible. Other voices begin to seep into your mind, right? And I think that, as adults, it's important that we begin to reconnect with that inner child, right? That child that we all have inside of us, because they were truly living life, right? They were truly making the most of each and every day. And I think that freedom that we experience as a child, right? That innocence in thinking that anything was possible, that we could, achieve or we could do anything that we dreamed up, right? That is the essence of being, right? That belief in ultimate freedom and the ability to just express yourself without thinking about being judged or what you're supposed to be doing, right? Or what the world is expecting of you, right? The ability to just truly live free and as you see fit. That is the essence of truly being. And I pray that we all begin to kind of find ways to reconnect with that part of ourselves and make that a priority for ourselves, in adulthood, because I think that inner child was onto something for sure, whether we realized it or not. Now, with that said, thank y'all so much for tuning into this week's episode. I appreciate all the love and support. We'll be back next week with a brand new one. Until then, stay safe, and I'll talk to y'all soon. Bye.